Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Benefits Over Burdens, Policymaking Lessons from the Expanded Child Tax Credit. My name is Rachel Black, and I am an Associate Director at the Aspen Institute Financial Security Program. We are excited that you could join us this afternoon, and we are proud to be co-hosting this event with our partners, Springboard to Opportunities. So first, a little bit about us. The Financial Security Program's mission is to illuminate and solve the most critical financial challenges facing American households and to make financial security for all a top national priority. We aim for nothing less than a more inclusive economy with reduced wealth inequality and shared prosperity. Core to Aspen FSP's theory of change is that for policies advancing financial security to reflect the experiences and needs of the people being impacted, those people need power and influence over how those policies are designed, delivered, and evaluated. Our partner on this event is Springboard to Opportunities, and Springboard connects families living in affordable housing with resources and programs that help them advance themselves in school, work, and life. Their programs are fundamentally resident-driven, and they listen to the needs of the community and create resources that support and empower them as they take steps towards success. Notable, especially for this conversation, one of these programs is the Magnolia Mothers Trust, the country's longest-running guaranteed income demonstration project and the only one in the nation specifically serving Black women in public housing. Before we jump in, I'd like to thank the financial supporters of this event, which was developed as part of the Global Inclusive Growth Partnership, a collaboration between the Aspen Institute and the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth. It was also developed with generous support from JP Morgan Chase, Prudential Financial, and the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. The goal of today's event is to examine two core questions. How would we understand policy differently if we saw it through the lens of the people whom these policies were intended to serve? And second, how would this understanding change our idea of what a well-designed policy looks like and how we evaluate how well it's doing what it was designed to do? These questions were also at the center of a report Aspen FSP and Springboard released last week that I co-authored with my colleague Riani Carr called Start at the Beginning, a person-centered design and evaluation framework to boost household cash flow and beyond. The framework was informed by dozens of conversations with women served by Springboard over the past 4 years and offers a practical tool for making apples-to-apples comparisons of policies to boost household cash flow, like TANF and the child tax credit, according to criteria that matter to the people those policies are intended to serve. A clear takeaway from this analysis is that policies intended to provide benefits also frequently impose very real costs. The hassle of visiting multiple offices to apply and recertify for benefits, often during business hours when people are also trying to manage care and work responsibilities, the stress of trying to navigate layers of forms in a language that isn't your own, the stigma of redeeming SNAP benefits on a bright yellow EBT card. We have to capture both the benefits and burden sides of the ledger to design effective policy that shifts the balance in favor of the people that the policies are supposed to be serving. What we aim to provide with this framework is definition around what those beneficials and burdensome design practices are, as well as add dimension around why these choices matter beyond just dollars and cents, especially the messages different design practices deliver about the deservingness and belonging of the people who are receiving them and how responsive they should expect the government to be towards their needs. It should be no surprise that if your treatment by government programs is marked by indifference or hostility, that you would translate these experiences as a statement about your political value, and it would undermine your faith in government to do good in your life. As one mom we interviewed, Aisha, put it, why is there a government if it's not going to help us? What's the point of being in a position of power if you're not using that power to help? And as our panelist Pam Hurd scholarship around administrative burden demonstrates, these messages are loudest for poor and working class families broadly, and Black and Brown families specifically, who'll encounter exclusionary practices from multiple fronts, from restricted access to healthcare, food assistance, and beyond. It's our view that moving policymaking in a person-centered direction is not only essential for ensuring the well-being of our nation's families, but for repairing the breach of trust inflicted by an ongoing failure to do so. Policies designed like the expanded child tax credit, with its lack of conditions, unrestricted use, and nearly automatic delivery for millions of families, is an important marker for what person centricity looks like in practice, though, as our panel will discuss, there's still room for improvement. But as we argue in our report, as significant as these reforms are, their greater value is signaling the changes that are needed throughout our benefit system. With this holistic view in mind, Aspen FSP's Benefits 21 initiative is working to apply the principle of person centricity as the starting point of reimagining our entire benefit system, both public and private, to create a modernized, inclusive, and equitable system of benefits that supports the financial security and economic dignity of all families. We're eager to engage everyone watching today in the conversation. We'll be live tweeting from @AspenFSP, and you can join in with hashtag AspenFSPLive. And now to kick us off, I'm very excited to introduce our first panel, a recorded interview between Dewana Johnson and Kimberly McNair, participants in the Magnolia Mothers Trust, and our moderator for today's event, Bryce, an independent journalist who has reported extensively on issues relating to the economy, welfare policy, and gender. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you both so much for joining us. If you could just say your name and share a little bit about who you are and who's in your family.
Well, first of all, my name is Dewana Johnson, and I have two beautiful and wonderful kids. One of them name is Kennedy Williams, and the other one is Jared Johnson. And I'm a mom. You know, I've done my best, you know, raising my kids and trying to provide for them. And you know, and like I said, I'm so grateful of the programs that I've been able to utilize to help me along the way to stay sustained. And I'm also, I work in the school system, and I work with kids every day, and that's a joy by itself.
And my name is Kimberly McNair, and I have two handsome boys, Kentavious and Kenari, 11 and 8. And I work with the Mississippi Department of Employment Security, where I help people who are unemployed and try to get them back in the work field. And I work out every day now, thanks to the Mother Trust program, and I'm just trying to stay healthy.
Great. To get us started, I would love to hear if either of you have received benefits from the government before you were in Magnolia Mothers Trust, and if so, what that was like, what that experience was like.
Well, for me, yes, I have. It was the EBT food stamps, and it really helped me along the way because it, you know, with the income that I'm on and was on, it wasn't enough to be able to carry the, you know, the weight to be able to support my family, like feeding them, because I didn't have enough income to supplement that income, you know, to feed them. So yes, and also with housing, it has helped me as well because it paid a portion of my rent, which was a great thing for me because I wouldn't have been able to afford the full cost of the rent.
And Kimberly, how about you?
Yes, ma'am. I have also received food assistance. I haven't received it in a while, but when I did receive it, it did help out a lot because groceries are high. So, and the kids, they eat all day long, so they go through the groceries pretty fast. So they helped out a lot. And also I received housing assistance where they pay a portion of my rent. And that's very helpful with me not just making a lot of money annually. And if I have a time where I probably need to miss work or I'm out sick or I have to change jobs, you know, that housing assistance really helps me and brings me comfort knowing that I won't be kicked out of my home because I face those problems.
Yeah. When you were signing up for those benefits, was it ever challenging? Have you ever faced any difficulties getting things like food stamps or housing assistance?
Me, when I, you know, because of course I don't get any food stamps, but at the time when I signed up, it was years ago, and I didn't have a problem. You know, it wasn't like a roadblock on getting them. I was able to get them without any problem. And as far as housing, I was actually paying the full rent where I was staying, but due to an accident that I was involved in, it caused me to lose what the income that I had, and I couldn't go to work for a couple of years. And so therefore I ended up seeing it on the news where they was doing the application for it, the assistance for housing. And so my sister ran down and got me an application. I filled it out, she took it back. And probably within about 3 months, I ended up getting a place, and so it benefited me. So that was kind of smooth sailing. Like, I know sometimes it's hard for people who needs the help, and the assistance, the list don't be opened up, so they can't just walk into getting housing or getting help with, you know, with their rent or whatever. So it was just pretty easy for me to get at that time.
I have been on housing assistance since this was my first apartment. So I'm still staying here. I believe it's probably been about 9 to 10 years. So when I first did apply, it was very easy selling. I didn't have any complications. I got right in and got the assistance I needed. And every year thereafter, we do our yearly certifications, and it's just up to you to turn in with the information they need and go from there.
And you both received the Magnolia Mothers Trust funding. Can you talk about what it was like to start getting that, and what impact it had on you? What differences it made for you?
Well, I must say, it couldn't have came at a better time for me. When pandemic hit, I was working, you know, I worked through this as a sub in the school system, and school was out for a whole week. And we didn't go back to school. We didn't go back to work. So it couldn't have came at a better time for me, because I would have lost income, which I did lose income, but I gained income with you guys. And it was wonderful. It was just a blessing in the skies for me to be able to get that. And it helped me, it carried me along the way. Like I said, mind you, I, you know, didn't receive food stamps or don't receive food stamps. And I still had to, you know, still had to pay bills. I still had to feed my family. So it was just a blessing in the sky for me, for that to fall in place, and for me to be able to receive that for that whole year that I got it. And you know, and it's great for a program to be out there to help women, because, you know, in the event of you working and you working 40 hours a week and still need assistance to be able to help you with your family. And I'm not ashamed of programs like that, because it's truly some hardworking people out there that really needs it.
Kimberly, how about you? What's it been like for you?
Well, I was just filled with joy when they selected me, and I just knew that it would be a great impact on my life, and it would bring change financially and mentally, emotionally, physically, all of those things. I have started working on myself as far as going to the gym. I have been able to get my boys involved in football, sports. I have been able to pay my rent, not worrying about being behind. If, like I said, if I have to miss days, then that's money missed. I still have money coming in on the 15th, where I know that money that was missed, that money on the 15th coming in can make up for that lost time. And it's just been, I'm grateful.
Can you guys talk a little bit about what you used the money for, what it went for? Did it help your kids? Did it help you? What are the sort of the things that the money ended up doing for you?
Well, with me, I was, like I told you, I was able to pay bills, buy groceries. I was allowed to be able to put some in a reserve to save as well. So, during the pandemic, it wasn't a lot of moving around for me because of, it was just a brand new pandemic. And so therefore, it just gave me a comfort of being able to have that coming in, kind of supplement my regular income, but still it was income to still be able to maintain and sustain for me and my family. So it wasn't no just splurging on things. It was just a supplement, but it was a blessing still to be able to have that supplement income to be able to still keep me afloat. So I was so graceful for being able to have that. Otherwise, it'd have been hardship on me.
And Kimberly, do you have any thoughts to add?
Yes, ma'am. Basically, like I said, just being able to do more than what I have been able to do before. Not worrying about, how this bill is going to get paid, being able to save. And they also did offer our kids a college savings account. So that was also another blessing. But being able to save for hard times when, you don't have it and you got this other money put away, you can go into your savings account, say, hey, I had extra money, I saved it. Now I have no worries. I'm able to do more than what I was able to do in the past. I don't have to go to anyone and ask for money and having them saying, what do you need that for? Or something like that. It's like a support system.
Thank you. Also this year, most American families are receiving the new child tax credit payments every month, starting in July. Have you guys received them? And if so, what is it like to receive those? Is it similar to Magnolia Mothers Trust? Is it helping you? Is it making a difference?
It's definitely making a difference for me. I'm back at work now, and it's extra money to be able to move a little further, to be able to get a step ahead. I'm able to, my son, he's in school, my daughter's in college. So it's like a support to be able to get some of the things that they need for school. My daughter, she's in this program for respiratory therapy. So I had to, help buy uniforms and books and stuff like that for her. So it's definitely been amazing to be able to have the extra. And yes, it does. It's like a support, like Magnolia, mothers. It's definitely a support, and I'm grateful to have, be able to use it.
And Kimberly, have you received it, and has it made a difference for you?
Yes, ma'am. I have received that benefit as well, and it's just another plus. It's an add-on to the Mother's Trust. It kind of provides the same basics as the Mother Trust program does, just helping us get ahead and stay ahead. And like this year, I had so many hospital bills that built up, and that money just helps out a lot.
What do you think policymakers, lawmakers in Congress, lawmakers in your state should know about your life and the things that make policies work better for you? What are the things that make payments or other public benefits work for you and work for your families?
Well, when you were saying that, I just feel like policymakers, and that they should keep in mind that for the people and the moms and people in general, when they're making laws, to keep laws in place for people that struggling and need help. You know, that's a big consideration to always keep that in mind, that I know that in this country here, we help other people as well, but also just keep in mind that there's a lot of people in our country that needs the help as well. And to always, you know, to try to make sure that they maintain policies for the American people.
Kimberly, how about you? What would you want lawmakers to know?
Yes, ma'am, I do agree with her as well. Just as far as when you make the policies, put yourself in our shoes and try to make those policies from everyone's point of view and not just from yours, and dig down deep and from the heart, and think about, you know, what the single parents are going through, and the single fathers, and the less fortunate. You know, just think about their needs when you're making the policies, because everyone is not able, you know, and everyone is just not as fortunate and as others. So you just got to think about those who are less fortunate and are not able.
Thank you both so much. I think we're going to end it there because I know you've got lots of other things to do, but thank you guys so much for joining us and for sharing about your lives. It was great to meet you. It was great to hear a little bit about you.
Thank you as well.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for watching that video. It was really wonderful to be able to record that. I am Bryce Covert. Again, I'm an independent journalist. I write about the economy, and I'm a contributing writer at The Nation. And I'm really excited to have panelists with us to talk about the Mother's Magnolia Trust, the child tax credit, and how to make policies really work for people who need the most. The panel's going to be made up of Pamela Hurd, who is a professor of public policy at Georgetown University and author of the forthcoming book, Administrative Burden, Policymaking by Other Means. Aisha Yandoro is the CEO of Springboard to Opportunities, which provides strategic direct support to residents of federally subsidized affordable housing. And Radha Sheshagiri is the Director of Public Policy and Systems Change at Save Her Life, a nonprofit that helps low-income families build financial security. Thank you all so much for joining this panel. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I think to start out, it would be great, Aisha, if you can describe how the Magnolia Mothers Trust came to be in the first place, where the idea came from, and how you developed it.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question, Bryce. And thank you to all the other panelists and to our partners at Aspen for pulling all of this together. So the Magnolia Mothers Trust really came into fruition in 2018, but we started thinking about the work in 2017. And it really came into being based on similar conversations that you just heard with the women that we work with, really telling us what it was that they needed in order to be successful in advance, and us listening and us leaning into, you know, the possible rather than what we currently have within our system. And we understand that, you know, our current system of our social safety net is not really working for our families and helping them move towards economic mobility and moving up the ladder and getting out of affordable housing and creating a life that they want for themselves and their families. And our moms has told us that so much of their lives are really cash strapped. And we heard beautifully how our mom said, you know, you can work 40 hours a week and you can still be struggling. And that's what we heard time and time again. Our mothers were working 2 and 3 jobs, but they still did not have at the end of the day the financial resources necessary to pay for the little things that a lot of us take for granted, as well as the larger pieces in life. They didn't have the resources for emergencies. And so we really started thinking, you know, what if we went about giving our families, giving our moms what it was that they said that they needed, which was cash. Not another program, not another service, but really cash without restrictions. And how do we make sure that we are not further leaning into the paternalistic system of making it be restrictive, making it be demeaning in order to actually go about securing those resources? how do we make it seamless and easy and really lean into the trusting and the dignity? And so with the Magnolia Mothers Trust, we provide $1,000 a month for 12 months, no strings attached, to mothers that live in federally subsidized affordable housing. And as you heard Kimberly say, we also open 529 accounts for their kids that we seed with resources, because we're investing in our moms now, but we're also investing in their futures. So.
Great. That's such a fascinating history. And some of your answer leads me to my next question. You know, you mentioned that these conversations that you had, the mothers you were talking to were saying the existing safety net wasn't really doing what they needed for them. We now have the expanded child tax credit, which both those moms said that they're receiving, which acts a little bit differently than perhaps some other programs for the poor and low-income families do. It offers a certain amount of money every month for your children, doesn't have a work requirement, doesn't have, you know, other hoops to jump through. It's supposed to at least just sort of show up in your bank account. So I wonder if we can talk a little bit about how that differs from typical anti-poor, anti-poverty programs in this country. Pamela, perhaps you could start us off, you know, how this is a departure.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge departure, right? So some of it reflects this difference about, basically more like an income guarantee, where you're just giving people resources to figure out that they can use to figure out what they need to meet their needs, as opposed to food stamps or even housing subsidies, which, you can only use basically in certain ways. So there's sort of that shift. The other big shift, though, is the ease, I think, for many people, at least, in terms of how they receive this. So there's no application, there's no interview, there's no pulling together documentation, there's no recertification every year. At least the way the program is supposed to be designed, it's just income that shows up in your checking account every month. So the kinds of classic burdens and barriers that can affect at least some people who try to access traditional programs like food stamps or housing assistance aren't there. And it's really actually nice to hear stories from people who didn't find those programs difficult to navigate. But it is the case for a lot of people that they are difficult to navigate. And so, 1 out of every 5 people eligible for SNAP doesn't receive those benefits, and huge numbers of people don't receive housing assistance who are eligible for it for a range of different reasons, including just really significant barriers and obstacles.
So this program, the Magnolia Mothers Trust, it's not just the lack of hurdles, right? But it's giving families cash. I wonder if we can talk a little bit about why cash itself is important. Radha, in particular, I think in your work, you've seen a lot of this. If you could talk a little bit about what it means for families to get that kind of a benefit.
Yeah, thank you, Bryce. And thank you to the other panelists for opening this conversation. As we see the child tax credit rolling out, it's important to start with those who are receiving it, how they're receiving it, if they're receiving it, and how they're using it. We work with folks all across the country, and we hear from them every day. I'd like to share a story of Becky in West Virginia, who has been receiving the child tax credit. She's been using it for broadband bills. She's had to upgrade her broadband. She is a call center worker. And when the pandemic hit, she was asked to work from home. And she now uses that money, that cash allows her the flexibility to put that money toward her broadband so that she can work from home. Julia, who's a caseworker in Phoenix, started to work from home. And she also had to upgrade her equipment. She had to buy computer equipment for her son so he could learn from home. And that cash allowed for the option for Julia and Becky and millions like her to put that money toward where they needed it the most and how to best assist their families. And now that Julia is back at work part-time, her son is back at school, he needs snacks after school. So she uses her child tax credit money to get him snacks. She gives him a little allowance after school so he can go to the corner store and buy a snack after school every day. So it gives folks the flexibility. We are also seeing that folks are saving some of the money that they're receiving from the child tax credit for that rainy day. They're putting away a little bit for that unexpected flat tire or a broken arm or whatever may be around the corner. And having that savings account really helps to give that security and that base of financial stability.
Great. Pamela or Aisha, I don't know if either of you want to jump in and talk about why cash is important.
Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely going to jump in on that one. Bryce. As I was already unmuting myself, I was like, I don't know if she's coming to me, but I'm going. So I definitely think, you know, all of the pieces that Raja just said are important as it relates to cash. It allows you to be able to take care and plan for the pieces within your life that you otherwise may not have been able to take care of. But I also think there are other pieces that go beyond a consumer sovereignty and the capitalistic aspect of cash that we don't have enough conversations about, especially when we're talking about families that live on the margins or are extremely low income. We don't talk about how having cash actually allows you the dignity to make these decisions, and it allows you the ability to plan and zoom out and think about the big pictures of your life. I think those of us who are middle class or upper middle class or rich or, you know, whatever our financial situation may be, we take for granted how really important it is just to be able to plan and having the resources to plan, and how it's, you know, it's not time intensive. And for so many of our families, it is. If they don't have those resources, they can't plan, they don't have that agency, they're constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop, and knowing that when that other shoe drops, it is going to disrail their life for weeks, a month, or years in some instances. And so what we're seeing with our work, by giving moms that small amount of financial capital, in which we're saying we trust you, we see you, go about planning and doing what it is that you need, they now have that time. So it's not so much living a day-to-day of scarcity, but because of that, also they're showing up with joy for the first time. And we don't talk about Black joy. We don't talk about joy as an outcome enough. We're always really saying, oh, what are people buying? What are they saving? How does that show up and continue to perpetuate what we see within our economy, or how is that supporting our economy? But joy is a currency that is just as important when individuals are able to show up differently in their own lives, and they are able to begin to think about what is possible for themselves, not just associating their dreams with their kids' dreams. A perfect example of this, when we started this work in 2018, every time we would talk to our moms about what is it that you want for yourself, our moms always talked about what it was that they wanted for their kids. They would say, oh, I want a house so that my kids can have a yard. Or, oh, I want to make sure that, you know, my kids can get a good education. It was never centering themselves into the conversation about change. Now that's shifted. Now our moms are seeing what's possible for themselves. Now they're saying, oh, I would like to own a business, or, oh, I would like to own a home because I think I deserve a bedroom to myself. And so it's allowing them the ability to plan, to dream, to have joy, and to execute and function at a level that I think all of us should really begin to operationalize just a little differently about what that means, and how that really gets to sustainability of all of this work, and how that creates a brighter future for all of us and not just a subset of us.
Someone in the comments just said, I love joy as a currency, and I love that as well. That's great. So again, you know, the Magnolia Mothers Trust, the CTC payments, these are a bit of a departure from the way anti-poverty programs have worked typically in this country. I wonder if we can talk a bit about why. Why is it that government programs tend to include these barriers like means testing, work requirements, lots of paperwork, lots of check-ins? And what do they mean in practice for recipients who are trying to get help? You know, what does that mean when you're actually going about the business of signing up for housing assistance or SNAP? Pamela, I think you've done a lot of research here. I don't know if we want to jump in first.
Yeah, I mean, the reason we have, there's a few different reasons why these programs tend to be, effectively, basically, programs that are targeted at low-income populations tend to have a lot of burdens in them. So programs that benefit middle and upper class people, whether that's receiving your Social Security in later life, or the kinds of large tax credits we get for health insurance or home mortgage deductions, like the help that we get from government doesn't tend to be encumbered quite as much with these burdens. that is not true, typically speaking, for low-income populations. And some of it is ideological. There's a sense of, there's a long history of research showing this, that we view some people as deserving and other people as not deserving. So some of it is just ideological. Some of it boils down to, as well, the ways in which, and it intersects with this sort of idea of who's deserving and not deserving, but the assumptions that people will cheat the program, or that we're going to work really hard to make sure that only people eligible for these programs receive benefits. And so you build in all these, build in all these administrative layers effectively to ensure that people who are not eligible won't receive the benefits. The problem is, in practice, what that means is that many more people who actually are eligible for and need these benefits don't get them. And there are ways to design them differently. So this is where I, again, go a little bit back to some of this is about who we think is deserving or undeserving. We don't have much fraud. We have almost no fraud in the Social Security retirement program, for example. And there are no burdens in that program either, because all of the complexities, all of the thing to make sure that the right, basically that people were getting the benefits that they were supposed to get, all those burdens were sort of placed on government, and government took responsibility for that. We do the opposite for programs like SNAP or food stamps. So like, imagine showing up at a Social Security office at age 65 with your 50 years of wage earning records and your birth certificate and you're this and you're that, right? Like, that seems silly. But we, in fact, do require people to do that for a program like SNAP. So I think those are some of the key things driving some of those differences.
Radha or Aisha, I don't know if either of you want to jump in with any thoughts.
Sure. We, when the child tax credit started rolling out, we were curious to know if folks were even in the system. If this program was meant to reach families automatically, well, that means they had to be in the system in the first place. They had to file a tax return, or somehow the IRS had to be able to find this family to send them a check. And so there's been a lot of questions that's been raised. We've heard that internally, we've heard that externally. How do we send the money to folks if it's hard to find them in the first place? And we found at the beginning of January that 20% of our members had not filed a tax return, which left them vulnerable to missing out on the child tax credit payments. So there has to be considerable outreach done to make sure all the families are included in the system. And that relates to work benefits, because if you don't earn a wage, if you are in disability, or for any other reason, if you are below a threshold where you don't have to file a tax return, then you really risk missing out on the safety net, which helps put food on the table, keeps the lights on.
Yeah, all of those pieces, but then I also think we just have to call a thing and get at the root of it. And the reality is our policies are designed with a racist and sexist and classist lens, and they're intentionally designed that way. They are intentionally designed in order to dehumanize individuals and make it perpetually hard for individuals to receive the resources and benefits that they need for their families to survive. And we see in history that these issues that receiving resources became fundamentally more difficult to access in the 80s and 90s, when Black mothers were the individuals who needed the resources more than white mothers. We see that historically, when they started being block grants, that states that have a larger Black and Brown population, that those resources are much more difficult to access as well. So we can, definitely say that these are ideological issues, which they are, but we have to call out why these designs have been allowed to continue to be perpetuated within our society, and why we all continue to be comfortable with that. And how do we go about getting to the place where we do not allow ourselves the out and being comfortable with the reality that there is an entire swath of our population that is penalized because of their race, because of their gender, because of their class. And not only are they penalized, they are dehumanized on a daily basis when having to go about accessing critical resources. How would you feel, and I think, Pamela, I love your example about Social Security, I'm going to use that one, but how would you feel every 6 months or every year when it was time for you to go about recertifying that you had to go into office and you had to prove that you were poor enough to still need resources, that you had to go about dehumanizing yourself and saying, you know, I still can't take care of my family in a way that I feel I should be able to take care of my family. And at no fault of your own, is, you know, a societal policy fault that we still are not paying individuals wages that they need to actually survive. So we need a fundamental radical shift within how our policies are designed, which, you know, comes up in the paper, really taking a bottom-up approach, centering the conversations around those who are most impacted. I love what Kimberly said, put yourself in our shoes, where individuals are actually putting themselves in the shoes of those who are being impacted. And we just got to quit letting this mess slide, because it's ridiculous. And we are all impacted, not just a few of us. And we really have to get to where we are collectively recognizing that this is a fundamentally a us issue and a us challenge. And we, all of us, have to work towards resolving it.
If I could just second the point here about the degree to which these kinds of burdens specifically target Black Americans and especially Black women. Like, if you look at the composition of people on the programs where these burdens are highest, and it shift, and I mean, the thing is, you can see it shift within programs. So like, even across states, for example, there's a lot of variation across states and what poverty-based programs look like. And there's like a lot of examples where in states that have higher fractions of Black Americans, those programs are way more burdensome than the exact same program in states that have largely white populations, for example. I mean, there's just so much evidence of this, both historically and current day.
Thank you, guys. Yes, that is all such rich context, and I think moves well into my next question, which is, do you think that we are shifting the way that we view low-income Americans and the way that we structure benefits for them? It's a real open question, I think. You know, the CTC is very different. There were stimulus payments during the pandemic, but also obviously all of this is being currently debated in Congress, and it's all over the place. Are things changing? Are they moving in a good direction? Are we still sort of stuck where we always are? And I'm going to risk on a Zoom event to throw it out to anybody who wants to jump in, because I think all of you probably have something to say.
I don't know who had, Pamela or Rada, y'all have warm or fuzzy, because I don't have warm or fuzzy, and I don't want to come in with my doom and gloom. So if we have warm and fuzzy, I can sandwich my doom and gloom in the middle.
All right, I'll go positive then. So the story that I always tell about this is that when I was in graduate school, it was like the height of welfare reform. So this was the mid-1990s. And we literally like we were dismantling social programs like in front of, you know, like, so it was this era where we both were dismantling existing social welfare programs. We weren't adequately replacing many of those supports. It was a pretty grim era. And I remember sitting in those rooms at the time as a graduate student and listening to a lot of applied policy economists and people in positions of influence. And we were largely talking about single mothers. And I just remember in those meetings, no one said a word about what was going to happen to those kids while people were working at McDonald's or low-wage jobs, or taking care of other people's kids, quite frankly, when they were getting kicked off programs. So one big change I do feel like is with the child tax credit is the degree to which we're having at least discussions about raising children and caregiving as real work, and things that policies should support, rather than an ongoing refrain that no we have to work, and by work we mean paid employment. So that's one thing. I would say the second thing is around the administrative burden stuff. The other thing that I never heard in the 90s was really any concerns about how difficult it was to access programs. There's sort of some, I think there are some explanations for that, but I just would say that was just not something people basically conceptualized at policy folks, at least at the time, viewed it as it just weeded people out, right? Like you put a lot of administrative barriers in, and then of course, only the people who really needed them would overcome those barriers. The thinking around that has really changed. We have tons of evidence that that's not true, that those barriers are hardest on the people who need them the most. So that's the second thing I am more positive about, but I'll let you chime in with the more negative take.
So I'm excited about all of those pieces. So I guess it's not so doom and gloom. So definitely thrilled that we are having conversations about the child tax credit and expanding that. And that is actually allowing families to have the resources without work requirements. So I'm thrilled that this is the first time that we've had those conversations in years where we're actually, beginning to divorce work requirements with giving families the resources that they need. So that's exciting. But it's also, on the flip side of that, it is also very frustrating that we are still having to have conversations around permanency, that we're still having the burden of proving that reducing child poverty is a good thing for this country and having to build that case, which is, I can't wrap my head around it, quite frankly. The last couple of weeks and this up and down that we've been having with conversations around the child tax credit, I was telling someone on my team, I was like, I feel like we're not having a toxic relationship with the child tax credit, and we need to figure this out because it's too much. And so that is still concerning, that we still are having to prove the need for permanency, that we still are having to build that case. We have done so much with messaging and narrative, and it still has not, quote unquote, stuck for whatever reason. And I don't know how we get beyond that, quite frankly. And it feels like a very different place than we were a year ago or 18 months ago within this country, when we really did not have this widespread proof of what happens when you give people money. We now have that. We've had several stimulus checks and we saw what happened. We've had several rounds of checks, child tax credits, and we've seen what's happened. So now we have all of this plethora of evidence that actually shows that when you give people money, they go about taking care of their family. So all of this seedy ideology that people had told themselves was going to happen, we now have the data that dispels those myths, and we still are having a hard time with getting individuals to change their narrative and change their ideas and change their values as it relates to giving families the resources that they need.
To build on these wonderful comments so far, when we talk to families, we hear directly how they're using the money right now to put food on the table. This is putting food on the table. It's basic. This is the basic consumption. And when we asked families if they could count on this money, they knew that this was permanent. How would they spend it? Almost 75% said they would put it toward education or tutoring for their children. Almost 75%. And that represents hope for the future, hope for themselves, hope for their children. And if they just knew that this was coming in, the choices that folks could make for themselves and their families, really uplifting for me. Almost 70% said they would move to a bigger home, allowing themselves some extra room. And another thing that's given me optimism during this time with the child tax credit is to see how frequently we've been getting feedback about the child tax credit, sometimes every month, sometimes every couple of weeks, and having those feedback loops on how the program is going and how folks are spending money regularly. That's been a considerable improvement. We have gaps. We have gaps to fill. We have a little ways to go, but instituting a monthly payment and allowing us to monitor how folks are using it, how folks we can share that out is really powerful.
I'm going to grab a question from the audience, and I'm going to take the liberty of broadening a little bit. Someone wanted to find out if there has been any discussion of the health impacts of the Magnolia Mothers Trust. And I would also throw out there if Radha or others are hearing that about the CTC as well, not just financial, but health benefits. And then someone else also asked if $1,000 a month, like the Magnolia Mothers Trust, is enough. Are these payments enough? Do families need more? And again, you could talk about the child tax credit too, which is less than that. It's about $300 a month.
Yeah, so I'll tackle both of those first. As far as the health impacts, yes, we are seeing that individuals, specifically within our evaluation of the Magnolia Mothers Trust, can now actually go about assessing health insurance. So we see more moms are having health insurance. We are seeing more moms be able to buy more nutritious food so they feel like they're being healthier for themselves and their kids. You heard Kimberly say how she can go to the gym now, so she has a gym membership. So we actually have the hard quantitative data as well as the qualitative data. And we also are showing that it's reducing stress for both our moms and their kids with just their ability just to think about the day-to-day and planning for the future and those pieces. So we're seeing that. And as far as whether $1,000 is enough, I get that question a lot, and I always have two answers. So I'll say that any amount of money, if you're living a life of scarcity, any additional amount that you don't have to account for and you can use is enough. $25 is enough if you don't have $25. So I don't think we should get caught into the dollar amount, because then that sometimes makes it so where we get paralyzed and feel like we can't do anything if we feel like what it is that we're actually doing is not quote unquote enough. So that's one way to respond to that. But then the other way to respond to that is when we first started this work, we were very intentional in working with our moms to determine what the amount would be. And we settled on $1,000 a month for our program, specifically recognizing that not all programs are monoliths. So if you're doing a guaranteed income program, you definitely should tailor your program towards your population. But we settled on $1,000 specifically because we wanted to make sure that we were doing good without doing harm. And what that means is that our social safety net is punitive. So whenever you put cash in, other benefits are reduced. Magnolia Mothers Trust is considered income. It is not, because of the amount that we're providing, it is not a gift. All of the women, it's income that they have to report on during tax season. Now, on the flip side of that, because of the earned income tax credit, they get it back, but that's another conversation. So we wanted, like I said, we were very intentional in making sure we were doing good without doing harm. And what it is that we've seen is that on average, our moms have about $600 or $700 in the net. Y'all, it's a fly around my house all of a sudden, who is just photo bombing and being annoying. But anyway, apologies. They have a $600 or $700 net gain. So they have a reduction in benefits of $300 to $400, but they still indicate that having the cash without restrictions is more than enough.
Great. Well, we have just a few minutes remaining. So I'd like to end on sort of a future looking question, which is, having looked at the impacts of the Magnolia Mothers Trust, having seen a couple months of the child tax credit and how it is and isn't working, what are the lessons that should be learned by policymakers if they're designing benefits in the future? And again, both the good and the bad, especially when it comes to CTC, are there shortcomings there that need to be fixed? And are there real benefits from the way it's designed? And I'm also going to throw this out again to everyone, so jump on in.
Well, I'll start with the burden side, in the sense that I think the CTC offers like both positive and negative lessons. So like the positive lesson is the degree to which a lot of people are receiving, this is like ideal. It's effectively automatic enrollment, right? For most people, it just shows up in their checking account every month. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to fill out any forms. It just shows up. That is like ideal delivery. The problem is that it's not everyone, right? The problem is that there is a subgroup of especially low-income individuals who aren't getting it automatically because it does require that you have filed a tax return or that you have this connection with the IRS. And that's a group, we really have to work on that. And there are administrative ways for the federal government to do that. They can work with the Social Security Administration. There's potential for them to do outreach and work at the state level, for example, with SNAP programs. You can do cross data sharing. There are complexities with that. But long term, I just think that's super critical. We can't have a program like this and make it super easy for some people and nearly impossible for other people. You know, like you can't do programmatic design that way, or you shouldn't, I should say. And I'd second the kind of bigger picture. I do think is one of the challenges here is that we, with both the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit, you know, we have chosen to deliver social welfare benefits through the tax system, and that is upsides to it, but there are real downsides. The IRS is an enforcement agency. If I say to you, how does it make you feel when I say Internal Revenue Service? It makes most people their blood pressure rise a little bit, right? So that's the agency that you're going to try to navigate to get your social welfare benefit. That's complicated. I think there's ways to fix that and still have IRS administer it. We can look to have other agencies administer it, but I think we have to take that really seriously, that this is an agency, this is not their mission, and there are consequences then when we try to do benefit delivery through it.
I would agree. And I would also add that there's quite a bit of diversity among the recipients of the child tax credit. Not everyone is receiving it in the same way, and not everyone's using it in the same way. And it's important to get an understanding of the families that are being served. We know that a lot of mothers haven't received it because the child tax credit has gone to the spouse or the partner, but the mother is the primary caregiver, and she may need the funds more readily than the spouse or partner who may not have the caregiving responsibility. So we know that there's people are receiving and using this money in different ways, and it's important to establish those feedback loops. You know how people are actually receiving it.
Yeah, all of those pieces are definitely are important. I'm actually not going to end on the burden side, y'all. I'm not going to have any gloom and doom, I tell you. What I would honestly say to policymakers as we're thinking about this is that we can no longer argue behind the notion that we don't know what will happen. That's no longer a narrative or no longer the truth that we will allow, because we do know what happens when we give individuals money. We have 20 months worth of evidence now showing that. And what I also would say is, in the iconic words of Toni Morrison, if you have some power, then it is your job to empower someone else. And we have got to go about making better policies, and we've got to go about putting people in place that actually make the policies align to what it is that we know that we need and help us all live the life that we are deserving of.
Wonderful. We will end it there. Thank you all, Pamela, Radha, Aisha, for this conversation. It was really rich. It was wonderful. There was a great conversation going on in the chat. So lots of thoughts sparked. Thank you guys so much. You can turn off your cameras, and I'm going to hand us back over to Rachel.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for sticking with us. This was a really incredible conversation. I just want to end with some words of thanks to Juanita, to Kimberly, to Bryce, Aisha, Pam, and Radha for lending your voice and expertise to this conversation, as well as our financial supporters, MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth, JP Morgan Chase, Prudential Financial, and the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. To dig more deeply into the themes that we've talked about today, please check out our recent paper, started at the beginning, a person-centered design and evaluation framework to boost household cash flow and beyond, which is available on Aspen FSP's website, and we look forward to seeing you soon.